So hey everyone. So today we're starting our toxicology course here at Magic School, and we're going through toxicology, the principles of toxicology. We'll also be talking about absorption route of toxins in the body and all that. So yeah, let's get into it. So now going into the definition of toxicology. Toxicology is the scientific study of the harmful effect of chemicals, physical or biological agents on living organisms. It involves the identification, characterization, and quantification of this toxin and the toxic effect of these agents. Now, toxicology deals with the study of these toxins and the way they affect the body, and also the mechanism by which they do this. Now, after the understanding of the mechanism of action of these toxins, processes and procedures can be developed so as to mitigate the effect of these toxins in the body system. Now, moving on to the basic principles of toxicology. The first one here is the dose-response relationship. Now, this tends to emphasize that the amount of a toxic substance that an individual is being exposed to or is taking in will determine the degree of toxicity of that toxin. Time response relationship. Now, if peradventure the amount that such an individual is being exposed to is in a limited amount, is in a small amount. Now over a long period of time, there will be accumulation of these toxins in the body if they are not being excreted, and then that will then cause toxicity in the body. Now, still under the time response relationship, we can consider occupational toxicology, where a particular individual is being exposed to chemicals on a daily basis, and probably such an individual is not carrying out the proper preventive measures. So now continuous exposure to these chemicals from Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and then over time probably just being exposed to in small amount, and then over time it begins to accumulate in the body, and eventually the person begins to come down with an illness as a result of these toxins that are present in the body. Now, the route of exposure, depending on the route of exposure will depend on how fast the toxin is able to exhibit its toxicity. Now, about accumulation. When these toxins are not being easily eliminated from the body and then they are being stored in the body, probably in an organ, this results in bioaccumulation. And when these toxins eventually reach a particular amount, they then begin to exhibit their toxicity. Now, let's go to the next one: individual variability. Now, no two individuals are the same. The genetic makeup of one individual is different from the other, which also shows that the susceptibility of one individual to the effect of a toxin could be different from another individual. Now, threshold. There's a certain level of exposure to a toxin before it can actually exhibit its effects in the body. Now, below this threshold, there is no observable toxicity from that particular toxin. Now, chemical interaction. Now, the presence of one or more chemicals in the body could affect or regulate the effects or the toxic effects of the other chemical. Now, it could either increase the effect or decrease the effect. I'm going through this later in details. Individual susceptibility. Now, depending on their age, gender, genetics, or pre-existing health conditions, could affect their susceptibility to these toxins and their effects. Now, the mechanism of the toxicity. Now, it could cause this toxin called damage to the DNA. It could affect enzyme function, and it could also disrupt cell signals. Now, the absorption and distribution of toxicants, how it is being absorbed and how it's being distributed in the body and exact their toxic effects. We'll be looking at this further in other videos, but absorption will be treated in this video, so let's get into that. Absorption of toxicants and their distribution. So here the first one we're looking at is inhalation, and this deals with the inhalation of gases, aerosols, or vapors of volatile liquids. Now, the lung has a large surface area. This is why it's efficient in absorbing these toxins in the body. But now, when these toxins are being taken in from the nose, the mucosal lining of the nose can help to entrap water soluble toxins, or the ones that are also highly reactive, or the ones that react with the cell surface components before they get into the bronchia and all that. So now, the toxins that eventually get into the bronchia and get distributed into the lungs then gets into the alveolar spaces and then diffuses into the blood and dissolves in the blood. The gas molecules will keep moving from the alveolar space into the blood until a particular equilibrium is reached, where the concentration of the gas molecules in the alveolar space is equal to the concentration of the dissolved gas in the blood. Now, the rate of absorption of this toxin in the lungs is dependent on their solubility ratio. This solubility ratio is also called the blood gas partition coefficient and is unique for each gas. Now, for gases with low solubility ratio, the rate of transfer from the alveolar space into the lungs will depend on the blood flow through the lungs. For gases with high solubility ratio, their function will be as a result of the rate and depth of respiration. Now, coming to ingestion, now I'll be referring to these toxicants as xenobiotics because they can also be called xenobiotics. Now, food and water taken into the body through the mouth gets into the gastrointestinal tract, where they can then be absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, in the bloodstream, lipid soluble toxicants or lipid soluble xenobiotics are more readily absorbed than water soluble xenobiotics. Now, the extent of absorption of a toxin in the GI tract depends on their solubility and chemical properties. Now, the presence of other substance in GI tract will also affect the absorption. Now, in the GI tract, the absorption takes place in the mouth and in the rectum. Now, as the time of residence or the time it spends in a particular location in the GI tract will determine the rate of absorption or the degree of absorption there. Take for example the mouth. The food particles and water stay in the mouth for a short period of time. So therefore the absorption in the mouth is quite low, but the absorption in the rectum is quite high because because it stays there for a longer period of time. Now, organic acids and organic base are readily absorbed in the GI tract by simple diffusion when they are lipid soluble. In the GI epithelium, the particle size is more important than their lipid solubility. In the GI epithelium, the particulate size is inversely proportional to the rate of diffusion. So which means the smaller the size, the higher the diffusion, and the bigger the size, the lower the diffusion rate. Now, the ability of xenobiotics to resist change by intestinal flora, pH of the stomach, or stomach enzymes is very important, because interaction with the intestinal flora or the pH of the stomach or the stomach enzymes could bring about an alteration in these xenobiotics and either make them more toxic or more lipophilic, and then they are easily absorbed into the body. The next route of absorption we are considering is dermal, which refers to the skin. Now, the skin is a good barrier that protects the biological system, the inside of the biological system, from the environment. But now, under some conditions, these toxicants can get into the body system through the skin to cause their effects, and this depends on the condition of the skin, the rate or frequency of exposure to these toxicants, and the chemical properties of these toxicants. Now, toxicants that are lipophilic are seen to diffuse quite easily through the skin, and also the thickness or the toughness of the skin. Take for example the skin of the palm and the skin of the forehead. Toxicants or xenobiotics will easily diffuse through the skin of the forehead than through the skin of the hand because of their difference in texture. Toxicants can get into the body through injections when they are injected intravenously, and then this goes directly into the bloodstream, and then it could go on to carry out its effects or be metabolized and excreted out of the body. Now, there are other routes of exposure, but we won't be going into that here. Now, after understanding the route of absorption of these toxicants, it can then be used to assess and manage the toxicants and the effects already in the body system, and also develop procedures and protective gear that can be able to protect the human body from these toxicants, so that these toxicants don't get into the body system. With this, we have come to the end of introduction to toxicology. Next, to be going through toxicokinetics, so I hope you look forward to that. Yeah, thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.